Good morning and welcome. I'm Rob King and this is Homebrew number 26, my very first lager, and it's going to be a Bohemian Pilsner. For this one we're going to get the Aldi mulled wine warmer out again for a 10-litre batch. This time I have a solution for cooling and no leaks. Step 1. 13 litres of distilled water. I'm setting the temperature just around the 70 mark, get us going and turning that on. Since we're using distilled water, I'm being a little bit more thorough with the water chemicals. So we've got 0.2 grams of baking soda, 0.9 grams of calcium chloride, 0.8 grams of canning salt, 0.2 grams of chalk, 0.1 grams of Epsom salt and 0.7 grams of gypsum. The temperature is up to 50 degrees, so we're going to mix in the water chemicals. Once again, I've got the grains milled from Brew. This is effectively 2 kilograms of Bohemian Pilsner, which is 95% of the grist, and 120 grams of Carapils, which is about 5% of the grist. We've hit 67 degrees, it's time to mash in. This one doesn't seem to have clumped at all like the last one, so I think we're going to cover this up. We're at 66 degrees, so it can go up by 1 degree. So I'm just going to give that a little nudge. So in 15 minutes time, we're going to check the pH. We're going to take a small sample to do a pH reading, which means it needs to cool down, hence my cool mug. Check the pH. This is, oh wow, that smells really nice. This is 2 ml of lactic acid. I'll bring the pH down just by a tiny amount. The pH reading settled at 5.58, so adding 2 ml of lactic acid would have brought that down to about 5.39, so that's right bang smack in the middle of our ideal range. So we've just reached the end of the 60-minute mash, so the first thing we're going to do is just take a pre-boil gravity reading. In preparation for the next step, I have a pair of barbecue gloves after my lessons learned and burned fingers from last time. Fully sanitized too, so all good and ready to go. That does look lovely and pale, but it needs to come down to room temperature to take the reading. Time for our pre-boil gravity and pH reading. Wow, dead on 1050, which is a little higher than expected, but I was a bit worried we didn't quite have enough grains. So this all looks very positive indeed. Pre-boil pH, almost perfect. 5.49. Yes, we are actually surprisingly high pre-boil. So the estimated was 1042 and the actual was 1050. So actually the problem is my settings in Brewfather. I think I've been quite conservative here with my efficiency settings, which I've set to 65%. And I did think this last time that perhaps that was the case. So yes, I think, in future recipes, I do need to increase my brewhouse efficiency a little. We'll see though, but that does seem to be something I need to tailor in terms of my recipe settings. 4 hop additions are all Saaz. However, the alpha acid in it is only 3.8% and the average is typically 4.5. So I've had to put that back through Brewfather to actually recalculate all of the hop additions. So the hop additions are slightly higher. So the first one, 11 grams at 60 minutes. Second one, 10 grams at 30 minutes. Then third one at 4 grams at 5 minutes. And then there's a final addition of flame out of another 4 grams. We're ready to start the boil, so I'm going to start increasing the temperature up to a boil, and it's time to remove the grains. Our first hop addition at 60 minutes is 11 grams of Saaz. We are at the 30-minute point, so it's time for the next hop addition, 10 grams of Saaz. It's time for our 10-minute addition. First of all, 10 grams of Fermaid-O, yeast nutrients, and also 10 grams of Irish moss. This one's for clarity. We also have a new toy, which is my new cooling system. I've actually sanitized it as a first step, but we're also going to put it in now so it can join the boil, and actually that will actually make sure it's completely free from any bugs at all. Our 5-minute hop addition is a further 4 grams of Saaz. We are at the end of the boil, so this can come right the way down, and that will come off. We have our final hop addition, a further 4 grams of Saaz. And we are going to start cooling. So this has been in here for the last 10 minutes. So we're going to start the water going through, and that should bring down the temperature. Wow, that water coming out of the cooler is scalding. This was the step I had some real problems with the first time round, because I hadn't fully considered the cooling issues. However, with a lager, of course, we've got to bring the temperature down quite a long way. So I definitely needed something extra. This has worked out superbly well. It's actually designed for a 10-litre stovetop system, but seems to be working fine here. We've been going 5 minutes and the temperature is down to 54 degrees. We're down to 24 degrees, but it does seem to be struggling to get it any lower, so that's fine. I am going to transfer now, and I can bring the temperature down anyway. I've got the facilities to do that once it's in the fermenter, so that's the next step, transfer. The remaining volume looks to be about 9 litres. So we will just take a sample. This bit is certainly easier using this system. So we need to get the temperature down to around 15 degrees or room temperature for the sample. So the solution is temporarily in the fridge. So we're expecting this to be a bit high, aren't we? Original gravity. Yeah, definitely a bit high. So we are at 1062. It does come back to the brew house efficiency calculation that nothing calculated correctly all the way through. This has ended up a bit stronger. Do I dilute? Final pH reading going into fermentation. 5.3. So this is the SLO Lager S23. Characteristics are genuine bottom fermenting commercial yeast for Pilsner beers, which sounds absolutely perfect. A little bit more challenging, and hence the need for the cooler, is the fact that we need to get the temperature down to a range of 12 to 15 degrees C to be able to sort of pitch the yeast and then ferment. 8 hours in the fridge has got the temperature down to 15 degrees, so we can now pitch the yeast. These are both at exactly the same level, so I am going to dilute them slightly. I am going to add in 150 millilitres of bottled water. That should bring the gravity down just a little. I'm not sure exactly how much, but we were very close. So the upper range for a Pilsner is 1060, we were at 1062, so this may do exactly what we need. But I'm going to remeasure the gravity after I've done this. Here's the first one. Could have perhaps gone just a little more, but we're going to take a gravity reading and see where we are. This was all sanitized first, everything's been sanitized. This of course is now too cold because we need to be room temperature to take a gravity reading. So I'm just going to put that away for a little while and we're going to pitch the yeast. So I'll halve the packet, so we've got 5.5 grams of safe lager yeast. That yeast is sitting on the top a little bit, so we're going to give them a swish. Okay, we're done. Time for an airlock, and I'm going to put them in my fermentation chamber so we can keep that temperature around the 13 degrees centigrade mark. Brew day is done. Our diluted sample is at room temperature, so I think we can safely say it's on 1060. So that's put us in range of the upper gravity, but I still think the ABV is going to be higher than the classification for a Pilsner. Still, it's all in the taste. Day 0, this is their new home for a while. Let's get that temperature down to 13 degrees. There's a little pressure in there, but not a lot of activity. Some interesting stuff going on in here though. Moonbase alpha there. This is day 2, fermentation has started. Day 5 and things are heating up, well, so to speak. So with a lager, there is a stage called a Diacetyl Rest, which is to raise the temperature up to allow any unwanted diacetyl flavours to remain within the lager. Now the question is whether we actually need this for the safe lager S26 yeast or not. However, we're going to try and cover all the bases to make sure this is as good as it can possibly be. So I am going to raise the temperature up to 19 degrees for a period of between 3 and 10 days. That will allow the primary fermentation to complete. It is mostly complete. You'll see the occasional bubble in the airlock, so we are fairly well through the primary fermentation stages. And the next step after this will then be to move it into a secondary vessel and then bring the temperature right the way down for the lagering stage, which is to keep that temperature for a period of 4 weeks right the way down at a range between 0 and 3 degrees centigrade. I'm not sure if we need a diacetyl rest for this yeast or not, so I'm going to err on the side of caution quite reasonably to do that. Fermentation hasn't quite finished, but you can see the clarity is already starting to come through, which is really promising. So I am quite looking forward to that next lagering stage when we can decant it out and sort of see what that really looks like. A slightly more subtle change is the probe has been monitoring the temperature by being right on the side of the vessel itself, hence the cling film here that's been holding it in place. For the diacetyl rest, we're going to just record the ambient temperature within the fermentation chamber itself. We are day 12. Just a little bit of activity still going on. This is day 14 and it's time for a change. We're on day 14 and it's ready to move to secondary. It's already clearing very nicely, but we're going to actually get it off that Krausen, and I think this at the bottom possibly is part of the hot break. I don't think I was supposed to take that bit with me if I could avoid it, though tricky under the circumstances. Everything's been sanitized, got the siphon here and some new demijohns. A little bit transferred there at the end, but actually I think we got a lot out of that. This one, we're going to try and take a sample. So the gravity is currently 1.014. Let's give this some protection. Obviously still early and obviously not carbonated, but does smell absolutely spot on. It's got that very sweet smell to it. Got a little bit more bitterness after on the aftertaste, but lovely on the first sip. That is probably the most impressive amount of trouble that I've seen on anything. It was pretty much impossible not to take some of that with me. You can sort of see a few bits floating, particularly in this second one. You can also see the two demijohns are slightly different sizes. So this is 3.8 litres, that's an American gallon. And this is closer to 4.5 litres, which is a UK gallon. We are now at the lagering stage. So over the next few days, I'm going to slowly start bringing that temperature down a few degrees at a time till we get down to that very low temperature. I've also made a bit of a discovery with the Fermentator in so much as the ambient temperature seems to jump all over the place when it's inside the chamber. So actually you need to place the probe much closer to the actual demijohns themselves. As soon as I did that, it settled right down. But for a little while, the heat was going up, the heat was coming off, the cooler was coming on, the cooler was coming off, and we'll sort of see on the charts exactly how much variation was going on. Well, some substantial cleanup to do next, I think. This is going to be the last time we use this one. Unfortunately, it's misreading and it's leaking. It's day 16 and this has changed dramatically. So we're going to start reducing the temperature for lagering. It is day 24 and we're just taking a quick look here. The temperature has been reducing for 10 days, so we've been stepping down to 1 degrees where it's been for a couple of days now. It really has remained remarkably clear. There has been very little at the bottom.
This phase has been monitoring the ambient temperature rather than the temperature right on the side of the demijohn, and the sensor's been located there at the back. I am going to tweak that slightly and put it back on the demijohn and see if the controls will be better.
Seems to be struggling to maintain temperature. Let's have a look what's going on inside. Seals all seem good. This is inside. Still pretty cold. I've moved the probe here and it's going to be right at the back. Opening to normal temperature and the bubbler goes mad. I've really struggled to keep the fermentator down to the temperature I wanted for lagering. It's not done too bad, but the ambient temperature in the room clearly has quite an effect on how low it can go. Recently it's been as high as 4 degrees. Same Pilsner, 2 different colours. Intriguing. So we're out of the fridge. I do think we have quite a lot of clarity. Condensation doesn't make that easy to see. But we're going to keg it and carbonate. So while I'm going to keg this, I'm also going to do just 1 bottle to see whether it's possible to carbonate in the bottle. Given the extended lagering period, I may need to add a bit more yeast at this stage if I want to carbonate. But I can afford 1 bottle just as a bit of an experiment. Meanwhile, this is ready to transfer. This is just 2 grams of sugar. This is an American gallon, 3.8 litres, which is a bit short for this. And I'm also going to take a little bit extra out to put in this bottle. So this can go in the fridge for a couple of weeks to carbonate. This is my experiment, so we'll see how that gets on. And I suppose I better get my scrubbing brush out. Although you can't see it very well, actually very little sediment at the bottom. That's all the Pilsner in the fridge now. Half carbonating, half waiting. This is going to be the first pour. Well, certainly carbonated. Wow, this is looking good. I have waited a long time for this, but it does seem like it's been worth the wait. It's beautifully clear. Hopefully you can see that. It's got a delicious malty aroma too. Carbonation, I think, is perfect. It's been exactly a week. That is crisp and actually surprisingly full to the mouthfeel. That has turned out wonderfully. Ooh, enjoying that. day 85. So it's time for the second demijohn. This one's a little smaller. It's a simple transfer and carbonate. I'm going to increase the length of the dip tube. There was quite a lot left of the Pilsner, so it definitely needs a little bit more length. The old one was 31.5 centimeters, the new one is 33 centimeters. So this is the difference in length. You can just about see there. In theory, the old one should have gone to the bottom, but you can see that it probably twists and did leave quite a lot of Pilsner behind. Newly extended dip tube. So this is the set and weight method. So we're going to set this to 10 psi. Fridge for this. How did the bottle carbonation get on? We will see. It has been a couple of weeks. Fizz. Wow. Success. That is a surprise, but a pleasant one. Yeah, lovely carbonation. Still got that wonderful aroma. Very malty. Oh, I do like this beer. Welcome to the Lessons Learned. This is day number 93. Today is actually the 16th of October and we started this brew all the way back on the 15th of July. So we are just 3 months in and the end result was wonderful. It still has that sweet, lovely character. Oh yes, so this one is a really great brew to do. But what are our lessons learned? Well, lesson number 1 was a brewfather lesson. I set my efficiency settings at 65%, but actually when they recalculated the end result after the day, it came out as 84%. Now that is a bit high, but in the future when I use the Aldi mulled wine warmer, I will be using a higher efficiency setting. Lesson number 2 was my new chiller. That on the whole worked pretty darned well and certainly much better than my previous attempts. However, it does seem to struggle below that 24-degree mark. I don't know if it was the temperature on the day, but certainly putting in the fridge for that last stage seemed to be the best way forward. Lesson number 3, which I did know but didn't do, was that lager should be well aerated before you put it into fermentation. Didn't do any harm, obviously, but it is one to remember. Lesson number 4 then is quite a funny one. It was all of that hot break that I took with me in transfer, and that resulted in a huge amount of sediment in the demijohns through primary fermentation. In the future, the solution to this is going to be to whirlpool and try not to take as much of that hot break and sediment with me. Now I'm planning an upgrade to the Aldi mulled wine warmer to be able to create a whirlpool. We'll see how that goes. My first attempt at an upgrade hasn't gone too badly, so I'm getting brave. Lesson number 5 is the Ferminator. And I love my Ferminator, it works pretty well on the whole. It warms things up when they're too cold and it cools things down when they're too hot. However, I am still learning a little bit in terms of the ambient temperature around it. And actually, unbelievably, we had such a hot summer and indoors it was incredibly hot.
it really did struggle to actually sort of maintain temperature given the outside temperature in the room was just so high. However, I've now moved into the garage and it's winter, and now I seem to be just seeing a little bit of the opposite side in terms of maintaining the temperature when it's particularly cold outside. So still lots to learn, I think, in terms of my Ferminator. Lesson number 6 is more of a question, and that was the Diacetyl Rest. To err on the side of caution, I included a Diacetyl Rest, but did I actually need one? I'm still not sure. I'd love to hear your feedback. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate having an audience. Please do like and subscribe, and please do comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So over to some of my mistakes along the way. Stay to the end for the outtakes. Cheers.
One more glass and then I'm going to bottle the rest. Probably isn't a lot. This is the counter pressure bottle filler. It will allow us to transfer from the mini-keg into the bottles and minimise the exposure to air. The steps are as follows: gas on, air out, gas on, air out, beer in. Allowing the gas to escape provides the pressure to transfer beer into the bottle while remaining under CO2 the whole time. This has been sped up, but shouldn't be done too quickly or the beer will foam. That was my distilled water. Okay, here we go then. We'll start to bring up the temperature of the Ferminator. So we are now at the lagering stage. So over the, excuse me. Oh yes, the ball's run out. Of course it has. Just that tiny hint of bitterness, maybe a little. Oh, well, I have to say, oh gosh. Not so simple when the siphon broke.